We have our guest host in with me, Attorney Mark Wolber, Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi joining us as Dave is on vacation. But topic we've been talking about for a couple of years now, Gene. Here we are, a little bit of a decision coming down over the last week. Agency approves here at the top of my page, controversial rail trail plan. Tell us more. What do you think?
Well, controversial pretty much covers it.
Yeah. And if you can give us a little background on what we're talking about.
Sure.
We're talking about the tracks that span from Tupper Lake to Lake Placid and some of the idea of how they could be used, waiting for the park agency to make their decision, and they've spoken.
Well, what happened last week was that the Adirondack Park Agency agreed with the Department of Environmental Conservation that ripping up the tracks would not significantly alter the classification of that corridor. It's a travel corridor.
Right.
The only other travel corridors outside of the railroad, all through the park, are roads. So, we are different than any other trail because we have tracks.
Right.
The DEC said taking up the tracks doesn't change the travel corridor.
Okay.
That was questionable.
All right.
The Adirondack Park Agency said you may be right about that. So they voted that it did not significantly change that plan. From here on out, when I say we, I mean not just the rail supporters, but we have a growing coalition of historic preservation people, environmental groups. We have the National Rail Passengers Association. I mean, it's becoming more of a groundswell of people who just think that this was a wrong-headed, not just the decision from the APA, but the plan from the DEC was. It's the wrong idea.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Is there any? Can you find some reasoning? Has there been any talk about how they came to this decision?
Well,
maybe we can back up because you have to share with us because I'm a little bit ignorant. What was the decision? We haven't even gotten to that. Tell us what the decision was.
There was a group of a fairly small but very vocal group of people that wanted to see the tracks removed all the way from Old Forge up to Lake Placid.
And that's to make a snowmobile trail.
That's to make it what they want to refer to as a recreational trail. Summers they would be hiking and biking and other forms of recreation.
Mixed use idea.
And they felt they couldn't do that if there's railroad
tracks. They couldn't do that if there's a rail there. And the railroad, since its inception in the 90s, has always advocated for multiple use of that trail. Not pulling up the tracks, but building a complementary system of trails. Sometimes right alongside the tracks. Sometimes it would have to be outside of the corridor, but a network of trails.
But that would allow you to have rail service from Utica right to Lake Placid.
Exactly.
And that's Gene's fight.
Exactly.
Yep.
Which in Lake Placid, I suppose, is a more desirable destination than Tupper Lake. Because people can go to Lake Placid, you can walk around. There's the Olympic Village or things to look at. There's not a lot in Tupper Lake. Nothing against
Lake
Tupper Lake.
Placid is an internationally known destination.
Yes.
There's just no question.
So
but
to
you would
be
need
able to go from Utica to Lake Placid on the railroad is a big advantage to you. That's your position, correct?
And the railroad anticipates doing a lot with other tourist attractions. We think like we do in Old Forge. We carried over 600 canoes and kayaks last year with Tickners in Old Forge.
I love it. Great idea.
We're setting up with mountain men biking now, and we will be doing bike trains.
And specifically for folks that don't know, they have certain specific train rides for, Mark, say you wanted to get out into the middle of the Adirondacks in a place that you couldn't reach by vehicle or hiking with your canoe, the rail system will bring you in the middle of the Adirondacks in which you're able to take your canoe and your equipment and go out. A little unique to our area, I would say, and the idea is to continue that.
Our thought was just that the region should not be an either-or region. You
Sure.
can either take a train or take a bike or a snowmobile. You should be able to do both. We firmly believe that the tourism industry in this region can support and needs both options.
Anthony, from the state level, any thought on this?
I agree with Gene 100%. We've been working pretty closely over the last couple of years trying to advocate for the rail to be rehabbed all the way up to Lake Placid. I think we're missing a tremendous tourism opportunity here. You know, the governor is trying to promote upstate New York as a destination. Millions of people come to New York State every year to tour.
And how many come from
downstate? I'm going to New
downstate?
York City, but what
Right.
the idea is, you know, while you're here, why not come on up to the beautiful Adirondack Park or Catskills or whatever area, Finger Lakes, wine region. So you can take an Amtrak train to Utica and then hop off and board the Adirondack Scenic Railroad, and the way we'd like to see it is go all the way up to Lake Placid. I agree with Gene. The two don't have to be in competition. You can have rail and you can have trail. You can do it both.
I agree.
And
Now,
there's
isn't
no-
the issue that there are some bridges or trestles that only accommodate one?
So you go around them.
Right
you
now.
go around
But, I
them.
mean, isn't that
That's
the
all.
issue that's being raised?
There are wetlands. There are rock cuts. I mean, there are
Yes.
places where it can't be side by side. No one that supports the idea of both suggests that they have to be parallel trails side by side the whole way. I think the people that want to tear the tracks up have been pretty successful in you getting that idea into people's heads. It's got to be a parallel trail, and you can't do that. Therefore, you got to take off the tracks.
But
It's just wrong.
The key, too, is there's hundreds, if not thousands, of trails in the Adirondack Park. There's one railroad, and we're going to tear it up. We're really doing we're splitting the baby here. We're really doing the worst of both, because we're still extending the rail or rehabbing the rail up to Tupper Lake, which is another 30 miles. You can go to Lake Placid.
Right.
I don't know why we just don't finish that.
Well, Tupper Lake is not really an international destination.
But they need the track system
They need
to
to get
continue.
to Tupper
need-
Lake to get to
Exactly.
Lake Placid.
Tupper
but-
Lake's a beautiful place. I love Tupper Lake,
but in and of itself,
everyone knows
it's
about Lake
not-
Placid.
Right. So the theory, I suppose, would be that foreign visitors come to New York. They
Sure.
come to New York City. They don't have a vehicle. So now they're likely to say, we'll take the train to Lake Placid because that's an international
see where the Olympics was.
center. But we wouldn't take the train if as far as we can go is to Tupper Lake. I mean,
Now,
is that kind of the idea?
I'd like to be really, really selfish here and say Utica stands to benefit in a huge, huge way from this. Because if we can do that, if we can get international travelers, and we have heard this from international tour packagers, they want to come up this way. That people do want to go to Lake Placid. The other thing that they want to see up here in upstate New York is the Baseball Hall of Fame. We've got this great wine country to the west. Utica can be the hub, and 3, 4, 5-day trips to upstate New York could include a run to Lake Placid, a visit to Cooperstown, a day of wineries, and a night at a casino. And this is something that will attract a great number of people.
Well, Europeans travel on the rail all the time. It's a very common thing when people go to Europe to get a Europass, and then you can ride the rail for 2 weeks or a month or however long you're there, and you can travel all around Europe on a railroad because people don't rent cars. There are issues about insurance, international licenses. You just get on the train, and sometimes they'll go on a destination. It takes a while. You get on, you sleep, and then get there, and you're fresh, and you
And
enjoy your destination.
that's a good point, Mark. And I think Gene brought up some good points. And going back to what Anthony said, you're going to take your train or you're going to drive into Utica right here. We have the throughway exit. Right here you have the train hub. Take Amtrak in, hop on the train, or continue your vacation. We're going to hit a break here in a few minutes here, Gene. But Friday, the park agency voted 9-1 of scrapping the 34-mile track. Where are we now? What are we going to do? What's the idea behind the next process here?
Well, the next step is that we as the coalition want to get the APA and the state agencies, actually, and Anthony, you and I will probably talk about this in the future, but they don't know what the surface of this path is going to be, this trail. So it's impossible to have done an environmental review because they don't know how it's going to be built. you have to have an environmental review before a project of this size.
Let me interrupt you so I understand. So the decision that was made by this agency said, take out the rails.
It said that if you take out the rails, it will not conflict with the state land master plan.
So they're encouraging that the
they're
rails be
saying
removed,
that if you remove them, it doesn't automatically revert to wild forest or canoe area or whatever it is.
So now, Anthony, let me ask you this question so we all understand this. So what agency has voted on this, and what does that mean, and what's the significance of that agency's decision?
Well, it's significant having DEC do what they did. It's significant having the APA,
that's the Adirondack Park Agency,
do what they did. So now I think it goes back to DEC, if I'm not mistaken, for a final ruling.
Yeah, I think they have to vote, right?
Well, they have to come up with the final formal plan and proposal as to what this thing is going to look like, how they're going to do it, and then Anthony, this is part of my question to you, but my understanding is that last week only said if you take up the tracks, this will still conform to the current use, because, and this is the part that is really significant. If those tracks come up and the corridor doesn't exist anymore legally, and there will be legal challenges to that decision, without question.
Sure. No question.
It's entirely possible that it will revert to the classification of the land that the tracks sit on right now. And in places, that land does not allow motorized or wheeled vehicles. So, if you take up the tracks, the land becomes part of that canoe area or that wilderness area or that other more restricted classification up in the Adirondacks. And then you can't run a snowmobile. You can't run a bike.
Realistically, once those tracks come out, they'll never go back again.
It
would not be cost effective to install those tracks because the cost of installing railroad tracks today is got to be just
it's like building a brick building again.
The only guarantee that the snowmobilers have of using that corridor is if the tracks are there.
Right.
Because if they come up, the legal challenges will be extremely detailed and well funded. The Sierra clubs, the nature conservancies, the deep-pocketed environmental groups are going to try and protect those wilderness areas.
Do they want the tracks out? Those organizations.
Actually, they're happier to have that than an unregulated superhighway for snowmobiles.
Because right now the snowmobiles, they do use the tracks. The trails do run on the snowmobile track.
But it's a pretty well contained.
Well, who would make the decision in the state to tear the tracks out? I mean, whose decision is that to make?
Ultimately,
yes,
the governor.
The governor?
Ultimately.
Now, if the governor makes that decision, can the legislature override?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure how that would work. I don't know if this is just an agency decision that can be made, or if the legislature could weigh in with statute. That's a great question. I'm not really sure.
It seems like a huge decision to me that the governor, who is he's put in place politically for 4 years, and then maybe he'll be in another 4 years, maybe he won't. But the implications of this are forever. It's for our lifetime and our children's and our grandchildren's lifetime.
Well,
once it's gone, it's never coming back.
This railroad has been there for over 100 years.
But I mean, it seems
our little volunteer railroad has carried over 1.5 million passengers.
Right.
In what period of time?
In the vast majority of them in the last 10 years.
What's great too is it's not just the railroad, the Adirondack Railroad. There's other tourist agencies out there that use the rail. There was a great article in the New York Times about rail bikes, which are becoming popular. These bikes that they sit on the tracks that people can use.
It's been talk with that from the Adirondack.
There's so many different possibilities for this. I think there's a real lack of respect in our country for rail. You talk about Europe. It's just ingrained over there. People use the train. And they're building more tracks. They're looking for more reliable rail, high-speed rail. Our infrastructure is so old in this country. We really don't pay enough due to rail, and we should because it's a great way to get yourself from point A to point B, going through the Adirondack Park, bringing your bike, bringing your kayak. You can go to trails. You can do whatever kind of recreational activity you want. during the summertime, and it's a fantastic way to get there through the train.
Great conversation.
And a less disruptive way to get it there.
Yeah, there you go. We got to take a break. We have to get to our news. And Gene Falvo, we've been talking to him from the Adirondack Scenic Railroad about the situation. Gene, is there anywhere that folks can go to learn more information or help support you guys?
Well, we will continue to put up some information on our website, which is AdirondackRR.com. And
you can always sign the petition. We did a petition drive over the summer with the railroad, so you can go on my website and sign the petition if you're interested in seeing the tracks being rehabbed all the way up to Lake Placid.
Perfect. Maybe we'll send the governor a ticket to head up to the Adirondacks.